Welcome back for episode 4 of the podcast. I'm joined today by Ollie.
Hey, Josh.
How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. You?
Yeah, not too bad. So we kind of brought you on. I wanted to chat a little bit to you about your endurance challenges. So do you want to start with why you got into these challenges in the first place? What sort of motivates you? What got you into venture? And what was the sort of first thing that set you off?
Well, to be honest, I've always been in team sports, and then in my kind of early 20s, I got enticed and persuaded into doing a stage race, a mountain bike stage race called the Transalps, which is a really, really tough 8-day race across the Alps, Germany, Austria, Italy, and France. And it unlocked something in me, definitely. The kind of endurance-based multi-day events, or just single day but long-winded stuff, really. And so from then on in, I kind of turned my back on team sports, and kind of looked at more solo-based things, which would challenge me in a whole new way, really. So back in 2007, a chap called Bruce and I did the Transalps, and I ended up raising money for a charity which just started that year called Ordinary to Extraordinary. And a guy who was working in the same bank as me said, I've heard you're doing this great challenge on the Transalps. Why don't you do it for my mate's new charity? He's just started it up. And that chap was a guy called Slats. And you'll hear a lot more about Slats in the next half an hour or so, because he is the driver of many things that I have done and will do in the future.
Okay, so you had this amazing first challenge. How did that one go, by the way? What kind of unfolded? And I know you're sort of.
It was so tricky. I mean, I've mountain biked all my life. I mean, that was my default kind of sport, I suppose, as a kid, other than football. I was on a bike every day of my life, and raced mountain bikes up to about 15, 16, and then a more serious approach to football took over, and I was getting injured riding bikes all the time. So I had to kind of curtail that a little bit, but then came back to it with aplomb, really, and it was intense. It was amazing, racing hard for 6, 7, 8 hours a day across the Alps. It was a baptism of fire, basically, coming back to mountain bike racing, going straight into an 8-day stage race. Absolutely relentless. Went through all the emotions. Wanted to quit. Wanted it to go longer. Having the time of our lives, really. So and it definitely lit a fire underneath me to do more.
So you've had this first like sort of amazing experience, and I think once you've gone through that little dip, I suppose you sort of realise that you can do a lot more. And so what was sort of next beyond that?
Well, I started getting a bit of reputation for doing stuff which was out of the ordinary. I mean, after that, I did an Ironman, which was when people didn't really do Ironmans. It was still an unknown. And it would be like, wow, now, I mean, everyone, to their credit, can do an Ironman, it seems, which is just an example about how endurance sports have, penetrated the masses now. And it's not just this freak show of weirdos who like going deep. So we raised some money for O2E, and what happened was I was then immediately thrust into a circle of like-minded people. So ordinary people doing extraordinary things, hence O2E, Ordinary to Extraordinary. And unbeknownst to myself, Slats and his merry band of men who have been doing these extraordinary things for years, but never really decided to channel it into good causes, until now. And so I raised a fair bit of money through the generosity of people at my work and family and friends off the back of the Transalps event. The guys at the charity, Slat, said, okay, well, what's next? What do you fancy doing? And, I was pretty much inundated with ideas and brainstorming crazy things to do on a weekly basis. So I was, in with both feet into a world of possibility, and pretty exciting. The possibilities are endless. And when you do something endurance based, as you well know, you go through hell, but it only makes the experience richer. And you think, well, if I can do that, what else can I do? And I think that question is something which us human beings, which are extraordinary machines, who don't tap into even 20% of our potential physically or mentally, generally in a standard lifetime. That wow, let's go and find out how far we can go. And like you mentioned in your opener, there's some other bits and pieces I've got up to over the years, to say the least. But not, still not enough for a lifetime, that's for sure.
Well, it's interesting with this. You talk about sort of people's mentality with endurance, and I think the way we're wired is to be sort of energy conservers. Our brains tell us, oh, we should relax. Like in the past, for hundreds of thousand years or whatever, for a long, long time, we'd find it hard to rest. We'd sort of be on the run from something or trying to catch something. And then we're in this modern world where there's endless opportunities to not do something. So where do you think the mentality comes from to actually want to do endurance and go through that, put yourself through that?
I think there was many drivers, to be honest, which curiosity was one of them. I mean, let's go back to the beginning. I was a centre midfielder as a kid, and for some reason, I could just run and run and run cross country in the middle of the park on a football pitch. I would just run, just constantly. So I knew I had this cardiovascular base, which I don't know was enabled me to have the foundation to go long. It wasn't like I had just kind of completely focused on one thing and taught myself that. I think I was lucky to be born with a pretty good aerobic capacity. Um, and so therefore I found long distance running quite straightforward. It'd just be a case of managing the event. Um, and I think I think when you do something which is longer or faster or harder than you first anticipated, it scares you to start with. And when you complete it, it's like a game. It's like a computer game, next level. So what do I do next? It's got to be longer. It's got to be faster. It's got to be progress. And I think that's again human nature. And so I think when people go into the endurance game, um, by the very nature of endurance sports and adventure, you're going to find a pretty cool place wherever you're going to do it. You're going to, and I mean physically and mentally, geographically, physically, you, because endurance sports happen um, in the great outdoors. It's where you get your free drugs, and it's not surprising that people come back for more and are hooked into it. Um, and so, yeah, for me, once you've had a taste of it, it's just a never-ending game of what's next.
Well, that's interesting, and I can sort of sympathise with that. And thinking of what I would like to do next, it's almost addicting. There's some times where you have those super lows, but once you're through it, you never change it. I think you've had this wonderful experience on your first challenge, and I want to sort of build up and talk to some big challenges that I've read about on your website. So do you want to talk to me a little bit about the Arctic Circle race?
Yeah, sure. So again, Slats was the driver behind this. So I've skied all my life really, and was pretty competent downhill, not downhill, yeah, alpine skier. But you know, Slats and I have done lots and lots of mountain bike challenges, cycling challenges, um, running challenges, ultra distance stuff, multi-day stuff, blah blah blah. And we sat down one day and said, look, sitting on a bike and turning the pedals doesn't matter where we are, how hard it is. It's still our thing. So let's do something which is completely off the wall. Let's learn a completely new skill. And we researched. We'd heard that cross country skiing was really, really hard work. It was some of the fittest people in the world at the cross country ski races, Nordic skiers, which again appealed to us because it means we have to train hard and be in prime condition. But also, it meant being thrust out of our comfort zones, being the bottom of the class instead of somewhere in the middle or towards the top of the class in a sport. We were on the slopes in Seefeld in Austria, and falling over like Bambi's on ice. It was embarrassing. Our instructor thought we were joking when we said we had already entered the Arctic Circle race. So let me give you a timeline. The Arctic Circle race is in the middle of March, and we decided to do this in September the previous year, having never cross-country skied before in our lives. So we said, well, let's just block book, I think 5 or 6 weekends in Austria through the end of November, through December and January. And we went out to Seefeld, which is a low altitude resort in Austria, just outside Innsbruck, and it's got kilometers upon kilometer of trail. The first weekend, and the second weekend, I don't think we even made out of the kind of resort, for want of a better word. It was just, hours upon hours of falling over. And what happens with Nordic skiing is it's timing. So you have this graceful, well, not graceful when you first start, this graceful motion where you're almost striding, but at the same time gliding. And as you place your pole into the snow, it gives you the leverage to then go further again and repeat that motion. And when you don't have that timing, and when you also are trying to manage the balance issue and the grip issue, etc., etc., it is demoralizing. But then again, learning any new sport is demoralizing. And at 36 years old, I think I wasn't used to, like I said, being, the worst at something, and it was terribly humbling. And I remember that the penny drop moment. I threw my toys out the pram on the second day, on the second visit out to Seefeld, and said, "Look, slats, this is not for me. I know I've already entered, but it's non-refundable. I'll let it go." And I hired a mountain bike, a big fat bike, and just went cycling into the forest on my own for the afternoon session, and had a long, hard think. And I quit basically. And then over dinner, Slats and Johnny, my partners in crime, said, "Look, we're not going to persuade you to do this, but we are," basically. And they said, "Look, promise us. I promise." Like they said, "I promise you, you will be sitting in your rocking chair, telling your grandkids about the Arctic Circle race in years to come if you do this. And it doesn't matter if we come dead last. Let's just learn this skill. We'll crack it, and we'll get out there and give it our best shot." And still, I couldn't be convinced. Slept on it, woke up the next morning, and I looked at my ski boots and thought, okay, I'll give it one go. And it sounds too good to be true, this, but genuinely, I got on the ice, on the snow, clipped in, and within about 100 yards, it clicked. The technique clicked. I had it. The timing was there, and the whole thing became easy. Like, instead of it being dragging each ski one at a time and doing this uncoordinated motion, I was gliding. It was happening, and it was there. And I said, "I'm in. I'm in. Game on." And that was it. And I didn't look back.
So that's interesting. You sort of finally get that moment when it all clicks, and I mean, I don't know what would have happened if you never got it. If you gone that first 100 yards and flopped, yeah, it might have changed things. So you built up to this event. You can finally start moving the skis, and how long between then until you set off?
Well, just before I go on there, I've just thought something. Another analogy for the same situation with learning a new skill. The first ever event I did was an Ironman triathlon, as I mentioned earlier, and I'd never ever done a triathlon before. And I had the same penny drop moment with swimming. I'm abysmal at swimming. I'm a lead weight. I drag my body through the water at a 45-degree angle, and I just couldn't do it. But after persevering and having some stern words from a coach, the penny dropped, and that moment made swimming the easiest thing in the world. It just went, and that was the same. It's the tipping point, and I think everyone has that tipping point in when learning a new skill, but also when trying to go longer than they have done before. So I digress slightly a bit, but I do think that it's a really relevant analogy in comparison to make. So going back to the Arctic Circle race, yeah. So we ended up having an absolute blast. We would go miles. We would go from Seefeld into Germany, like 45, 50k before lunchtime when the penny dropped. We had that ability to just go into the wilderness. And the beauty of Arctic, of Nordic skiing, cross-country skiing, is that you're alone. You're not on a piste with lots of other people. You're in the absolute wilderness, and there's just two little tracks, and you just follow them. It's stunning. It's silent. It's magical. And so we really had a passion for the sport. And by the time we got out to Greenland in March, we were still fully aware that we were going to be, amongst the worst there, because we were novices, but we were trying to fake it till we made it, basically. And yeah, we turned up in an absolutely extraordinary place called Seisemut. Greenland is a very, very interesting country with socio-economic challenges, just because of their livelihood has changed, the way their economy works, and but what they know is skiing and cross-country skiing, and it's a bit of a flagship event. People from all around the world had arrived at this event, which carries a fair bit of fear, because it's very remote, it's dangerous. The previous year someone had died, and there's only about 250 people that do it, I think. It's minus 40, and you're sleeping in tents in the middle of nowhere, basically, in the middle of exposed glaciers. And yeah, we were fish out of water. But I was with my partner in crime, Slats, and Johnny, and another guy called Stan, who had also done an event called Cape Epic in South Africa with. So I was with my kind of band of brothers, and it was without them, it would have been, it wouldn't have happened, basically. It's one of those things you need to experience with your partners in endurance, if you like. And we met some fantastic people, people that were, lifetime cross-country skiers, and it was their ambition to go and do this race. And there we were, who only really thought about it 6 months earlier. So it was extremely valuable experience. And the race itself, it's a 3-day race, and we practice on these perfectly groomed trails through the Alps, where the piste basher goes and lays down his tracks, so they're perfectly carved. And we expected that, and we practiced that on the practice course on the 2 or 3 days leading up to the start. And then on day one, massive storm overnight, and there's no tracks at all. So we literally had to just almost walk the first stage and just kind of skid ourselves forward, if you like, because there was no glide. All the storm had blown over the tracks, and it was utter carnage for a race which is, designed to be used in these tracks. Visibility was about a meter. There was a time on that first day, I think I was out there for probably 8-9 hours, and aiming for the finish line on day one, the base camp. And I think I was about maybe an hour away. And we kept being told, when in doubt, always keep the stakes to your right-hand side. If you can't see a stake, just keep moving forward, and it must be on your right-hand side. If it's on your left-hand side, then, you could be going off the side of a mountain or something. And I think after about 6, 7, 8 hours, I was pretty delirious, pretty tired, pretty low on fuel. And that one crucial bit of information, I got confused. I couldn't remember whether it was the left or the right. And I couldn't see anyone in front of me, no one behind me, and I just didn't know what to do. You can't hear anything, you can't see anything. I could see a stake, but I couldn't remember whether it had to be my left or my right. And that was one of the scariest moments, because you probably, if you get lost out there, you probably only got an hour or so before someone finds you, can find you. But needless to say, I cracked on, kept the stakes on the right side of me, and finished day one. And there's a video on my YouTube channel, actually, of us finishing day one with a couple of the guys coming in behind me. I filmed them. and so that was extraordinary. Yeah, absolutely. The wildest day of my life, I think, that was. And then we bedded down in a tent, four of us, all in this one tent. Winds howling, -40. Um, just surviving until the next day.
Did you
So
get a
yeah,
lot of
that
sleep
was.
that night?
No, I think about an hour, to be honest, and that's not an
Really?
exaggeration. No, generally, you're just lying there, looking, waiting for time. You're wishing time away because you're too cold to sleep. You're so uncomfortable. You have two or three sleeping bags. You have all your clothes on from the same day. You haven't showered from after doing a 9-hour event. You've it's absolutely raw, and then you wake up, and it's probably 4 in the morning. I think the sun came up, and I just went for a little stroll, and again took some video and some pictures. I think I was the first one up in camp because I didn't want to be lying in that tent any longer. And you pretty much are operating on zero sleep, yet trying to perform at your highest. And that's I think indicative of every single race I've done, endurance race, in that you generally don't need as much rest as you think you do. We're predisposed to get 8 hours sleep and a nice comfy bed, but some of the best performances I've put in have been off the back of a crappy night's sleep, or on the fifth day of an 8-day race. I've come alive and never felt better. Yet I've had no sleep, and I'm supposed to be depleted of everything. So yeah, that's the Arctic Circle race. Then day 2 and day 3 went well. Weather was beautiful, the tracks were in place, and we actually completed it with no drama. To be honest, it was extremely difficult. There was one time which I won't labour too much on this event, but the other worrying time was if you broke a pole, which does happen. Poles do snap if you're too heavy-handed with them. You wouldn't be able to push yourself forward. And there was a shadow part of the course where the sun was behind a huge mountain range, and the temperature dropped from about -20 to -40. And if you had any stubble or facial hair or your eyebrows, they would all turn to ice. It was instant. Your snot, your sweat, just your whole face becomes ice. Your glasses, any moisture on the glasses, just turn to ice. And there was a loop that went below this kind of ridge line, and then back on itself up to the end of the stage, and it was all below the sunlight, and it was so cold, and I was trying so hard to get through it that I pushed my pole into the ground and it bent. And luckily there were people behind me, people in front of me, but I got through it just by kind of being a bit gingerly with it. But it was a big scary moment because again, you could if you being towards the back of the race, there's not a great deal of people around you, and you are massively exposed. And you just don't have long in those conditions. They are so hostile that it's the adrenaline is pumping, but there's a huge element of fear as well. But it only adds to the level of accomplishment that you feel when you get through it.
So how did you feel sort of coming off? Like, what was it like once you finished? I mean, was it a relief? Was it just
It was a huge buzz. It was, I mean, because we were such amateurs at the sport, it felt like a massive achievement. It was only 3 days. It wasn't that long a distance, but it was. I think the gratification comes from knowing that you're never too old to learn new stuff. Slats and Johnny were in their early 50s. I was in my mid 30s, and we had all just learned a new sport and cracked the hardest event in the world for that sport. So I think it was more just the satisfaction that we could do that, and I owe a debt of gratitude to those guys that I have that memory, because they were talking sense and knew exactly what they were saying.
Well, I think you're right. I think you would have regretted it in the end. And I think what's interesting is, it's
Definitely.
so different to what else you've done. What you've done before. I think it's an amazing thing that people should, really think about, is trying. Like, I love my cycling, and the idea of doing something completely different terrifies me. But at the same time, I'm sure it's really rewarding.
It took me a long time to actually, to even contemplate doing something which I'm not very good at, because you naturally don't Google stuff which you don't do. You get excited by the prospect of taking your sport that you love um, and furthering it with a different spin on it, if you like, or a different distance, or a different place in the world to do it, or you know. But you always have your default sport in which to enact those dreams, and it was really, um, the vision of the other guys to say, let's do something different, let's do something which is really going to challenge us in a new way, and let's walk the walk and talk the talk. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Get out of your comfort zone. Well, okay, how much is doing a bike race out of your comfort zone? Sure, you're training hard. Sure, it's taking you to some hostile climates and environments, but you're still pedaling a bike, which is what you love to do. So, I think that was a really important thing for us to do. Um, and it definitely proves me wrong when I probably am too quick to discount any other opportunities which come our way, which are not kind of the things that I would immediately gravitate towards.
Well, it's a it's a great story. I'm glad that you ended up doing it, because it's a great story to listen to. I'm going to bring the podcast to a close. We're coming up to half an
Sure.
hour. It's a shame we didn't get a chance to chat about other stuff, but I'm sure we can bring you on at another point. Is there anything you want to add before we bring it to a close?
No, I would say a bit of a cliche, but never underestimate the distance, or the duration in which you could go. I mean, there is all the other endurance stuff I've done. There's always been a question mark as to whether I can do it, and I think if there is that question mark there, you're in the right place. You're in the if you know you can do it, but it's just going to be really hard, then are you really pushing yourself that hard? If there's a level of fear attached to an event which is directly related to your doubt in yourself that you've actually got the minerals or the wherewithal to actually get through it, then that's the event that's going to give you the biggest experience, and that's where you're going to get your gems.
Gotta get those that golden. It's like that fine line, isn't it? You're just over the edge. I mean, I was going to say you can't go much further than minus 40. I don't think you can
Oh,
go
it
much
was
further.
hideous. No, no,
um,
I think there is a point.
so just as we end the podcast, do you want to just tell people where they can find you, where they can find your website, or any social links you may have?
Yeah, I'm OllieRastall.com, and my Instagram is OllieRastall.com, Ollie Rastall. And then I have a YouTube which is called the Chopper Dad. Um, and you can scroll through that, and there's loads of stuff from the Arctic Circle race, and they're all very basic, because it was back in the day where video editing and YouTube was in its infancy. But yeah, there's some content on there which is quite fun to look back on. But yeah, and then the other charity, or the charity links which I mentioned earlier, Ordinary to Extraordinary, which is just o2e.org, and that's O and then a number 2e.org. And just a very quick one on the charity. They're a completely voluntary run. Stats started it, and I was there at the start. And I've been the chairman of that charity for a couple of years, and Stats has for a long time as well. And it's just like-minded people. Every single penny goes to a children's charity that is looking after terminally ill, or kids with life-limiting disabilities. And as it's all voluntary based, every single penny that people raise, be it going for a couch to 5K or going around the Arctic Circle race, it's all appreciated on exactly the same level, because everyone's extraordinary is different. Um, And yeah, we're proud to say that over the last 13 years since we started it, yeah, we raised about just over 2 million quid. Every penny has gone to the charities which we choose every year. And O2E supports small children's charities that don't really get a lot of help. You know, they're not your headline charities which have, you know, big marketing budgets and lots of exposure. They're the sorts of, you know, children's charities which are in every town but might not necessarily be very well known. And so each year we actually choose about 3 or 4 different charities which we feel could do with a boost or so with some sort of cash injection. So that's the gambit on O2E, and yeah, very unassuming, humbling place to be associated with, really.
Well, it's great. I think that's one of the things we spoke about on message before this. And I'd like to give you the opportunity to come back on at some point and we can talk to more. It's been great chatting to you, Ollie. I'm gonna have to bring it to a close, but
Appreciate it, Josh.
yeah, it's good when you leave someone you want to hear more stories.
That's the key, isn't it? If I think I do a bit of speaking, and the key is leave them wanting more, and I rarely do. So I'm glad we've kept my powder dry.
Exactly. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later.
Cool. Cheers, Josh.